Ladies and gentlemen, the man we welcome to the stage doesn't just speak because he wants to. He speaks because he was called to. Receiving life's messages is part of who he is, and spreading them is what he's meant to do. Without further ado, Wayne Looney.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here. I'm here now. And as always, I want to thank you for choosing to be here with me. Today, I have received a message and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you. And that message is about connecting to a higher power and how you can use that connection to find your purpose in this life. The reason why I believe this message is so important is because right now in our world and in society, I feel humanity's awareness as a whole has outgrown or risen above a lot of current belief systems or a lot of current religious beliefs. And that has made a lot of people not only feel disconnected from themselves, but also from a greater power or a greater meaning to this life. So today, I am going to be sharing my own journey and my own path to connecting to that greater meaning or that greater purpose in life. And I'm hoping by hearing my story, you can see the steps that you will need to take in order to connect to your own individual greater meaning to this life. Now, most people I know or most people I've come across have some belief in something greater than themselves. I say most because not all people believe in something greater than themselves. Not all people believe in a greater power, and that's okay. For those that do, they may refer to it as something different. Some people may call it God, some people may call it the universe, some people may even call it multiple gods or refer to it as karma. What you likely believe when it comes to that greater source or that greater power has come from what you were exposed to at a young age. And that likely came from your parents or from your family or the type of traditions you were raised in. At least that was the case for me. A lot of my first beliefs in a greater power came from my exposure as a kid. My family was never really that big into religion. However, we were taught to say prayers before we went to bed, and we were talked to about God and did occasionally go to Sunday school and to church and attend church on certain holidays like Christmas or Easter. So more or less, I was raised in the Christian faith, believing in God and the devil and angels and demons. I feel like that early exposure always made me believe in a greater power. Now, you can have the reverse happen too. Some people are exposed to religion at a certain age and it feels too restricting for them, or it feels too controlling, or maybe their parents are super religious, so they have to go to church every single Sunday or every Wednesday or Bible study and Sunday school and things like that. I feel like if you're exposed to too much at a young age, it can push you out of religion. I've seen people who have been exposed to religion and too much religion at a young age, and it caused them to reject or push away any religious beliefs or any belief in something greater or a power greater than themselves. So as adults, they believe that they are alone and that things happen only in a random sequence of events and nothing ever happens for a reason. And some people will tell you that they're happy living that way, but other people not so much. Now, back to what I was saying is that my early exposure at a young age and with Christianity and believing in God and prayers and things like that helped shape my initial relationship with that greater power. And I feel like it really shaped my morals and beliefs because you're taught in Christianity that if you live a certain way, if you do certain things, if you accept Jesus Christ as your savior, if you pray, if you go to church, if you create love and do positive things in this life, that you will make it to heaven. And if you do the reverse and you create negative and you do negative things or you get too involved with earthly desires and greed and hatred, which is the work of the devil, then you are bound to go to hell. And at a young age and hearing it as a kid, nobody wants to go to hell, right? You hear about this eternal fire and people burning and demons and being condemned to that place based on your deeds here in this world scares you. And it scared me. So it pushes you away from doing a lot of negative things or a lot of hurtful things. Now, that's obviously part of the purpose, right? Is to stop you from making decisions or doing things that may hurt or harm someone else. And on some level, I think we all need something like this. However, it did feel a little extreme. even as a kid. Like if I didn't follow a certain set of rules or boundaries or didn't hold a certain lifestyle, or if I couldn't live my life based on the 10 commandments, or I didn't accept Jesus Christ as my savior, or I didn't pray every day, or if I didn't read a certain amount of scripture, then I would be punished by God to live a life eternally in hell. And yes, you're taught as long as you accept Jesus Christ as your savior and as long as you ask God for forgiveness, then you would be forgiven. But I remember as a kid feeling like it was a little extreme. And as I continue to carry these beliefs throughout my adolescence and into early adulthood, I started to question them. I would say that I've always naturally been a curious person. And that means that I've always questioned things. I've questioned authority. I've questioned beliefs. I've always questioned the reasoning for things. And that may have come off as rebellious, especially in my teen years. But I've always been a curious person. And the more I started to question some of these beliefs, some of these views, and some of these perspectives, the less they started to make sense to me. For instance, I couldn't figure out why in this religious setting we were told to love one another unconditionally and to view each other as God's children and to love everyone as God would love us. However, it was okay, or at least some people thought it was okay, to treat people badly who didn't have the same views, beliefs, or even the same sexual preference as them. I was also really confused by the separatism and this almost like rivalry that there was between different religions, and how each religion seemed to believe that their perspective was more right and felt the need to either try to project or to push their views on the other. I could never make sense of that. And I also couldn't understand why people who attended church on a regular basis, read the Bible, and tried to live their life almost in the perfect manner or based on what they felt religion and the Bible was telling them to live, would look down on a person like me just because I didn't attend church on a regular basis, or maybe because I was a little rougher around the edges, even though I had the same exact beliefs as them. I've always done my best to live a life that I felt was morally right. But just like most people, I did make a lot of mistakes growing up, and I did do a lot of things that today I wish I hadn't done. However, there was a point in time in my life where I felt like I couldn't believe in religion or that I couldn't trust in God. And that period in my life was when I was depressed and when I was down and when I felt like religion and God had turned their back on me. And that made me angry and it made me upset because in a religious setting, you're told that if you're going through something difficult, if you're going through a challenging time in life, that you're supposed to give that to God and you're supposed to pray on it and you're supposed to have faith that things are going to go the way that they're supposed to go. And you're supposed to just trust that. And it's through prayer that God will answer you. And it's not always the answer that you expect. And it's not always on your time. It's on God's time. But for me, what that did was, yes, it made me place faith in God, right? Whenever I felt like I needed some guidance in life, I would ask and I would pray. However, if things didn't seem to be working out, no matter how much I prayed, then I would feel helpless and it would make me blame God. When I was at my lowest and when I was at my darkest spot in my life and had no hope and had given up on life completely, I felt like God had turned his back on me and I blamed him. I know this doesn't sound right and I really hate to say it, but I'm just keeping it real because that's how I felt. And I know I'm not the only person to ever feel this way. I know of people who, because they have had difficult things happen to them, or because they have witnessed horrible or even heinous things happen to the people that they care about, or they think about all the negative or hurtful things happening in the world, it makes them blame God and it makes them blame religion and it makes them want to ask God, why do you allow these things to happen? Or why have you allowed these things to happen to me? And it makes them resentful. I had my own experience with this. In one of my previous podcasts titled How Suicide Changed My Life, I talked about being in that dark, depressed state and how I had to bring myself out of that. When I finally brought myself out of that dark place, I did have a certain confidence. I did have a certain belief in myself. And when I got to that point, even though I had been away from church and had blamed God and was angry with him and was resentful and felt like he allowed certain things to happen to me. In a lot of ways, I still did believe that he existed, and I still believed that he had something in store for me, even at times where I felt angry or resentful. And when I finally got back on my feet, I did start to go back to church again, and I did start to read the Bible. Now, as an adult and after being through that dark period, I felt like my perspective changed and my mind opened and my attitude and my perspective on life was different. And this was partially because it had to change, right? Being at such a low point in my life and being as down and as hopeless as I was, I had to change my perspective. I had to change my mindset, and I had to change a lot of my beliefs in order to get myself out of that spot. I couldn't fix the problem in the same state of mind in which created it. So I had to change a lot of those things. And I had learned that through that experience, if there was something in my life that I wanted to happen, that I wanted to change, I had to believe in myself, and I had to take the steps and have the faith that those steps would lead me where I needed to go. So there came a certain responsibility and a certain confidence and belief in myself that I felt I needed to progress and to move forward in life. Anyone who's ever had to bring themselves out of a dark state knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's not that you don't have any faith or believe that God is helping you along the way, but there does come a certain responsibility to take control of your own life. And when you are able to do that, it does give you confidence. But when I started attending church again, I felt like that confidence that I had worked so hard to build was being knocked down in a very real way, because I would go to church and I would hear the pastor or the preacher speak, and he would deliver his sermon or his message. And sometimes that message would make me feel inspired, right? Or it'd make me feel encouraged, or it'd make me feel like I could deal with whatever was coming my way because God had my back. But other times I felt like my confidence and my belief in myself was being knocked down. I felt like I was constantly being told how imperfect I was and how sinful I was and how I was not worthy of God's blessings, even though he would give them to me. When you've come from a very dark and depressed state, that's the last thing you want to hear. And it's the last thing you need to hear, because you have just worked so hard to rebuild your confidence. However, it is still fragile. So anything that is attacking that confidence can really break you down. And it broke me down. It was this feeling that my confidence was being broken down and that my self-esteem was being knocked down that actually caused me to walk away from the church and walk away from religion. But it didn't cause me to give up on God or to give up on a greater power. Now, I know a lot of people listening to this are probably going to be thinking to themselves, well, if that's how the pastor at your church or the preacher at your church made you feel, then you can just go to a different church. Or that it was my pride and ego getting in the way of me hearing God's word. Maybe part of that is true. That's something I had to consider for myself. But my reply to that would be, at that point in my life, I felt in my heart that it made more sense for me to embark on my own path of self-discovery to find out what that greater power or God or the universe meant to me. So that's what I did. And the first step along this journey of self-discovery for me was having the willingness to look within, or having the willingness to reflect on my past experiences and what role I played in those experiences, because I felt in my heart that that was going to help me not only identify the relationship that I had within myself and with myself, but also help me identify and outline what role I play to others and in my environment. In turn, I felt this was going to help me better understand what relationship I was intended to have with that greater source or that greater power or God or the universe, whatever I was going to call it. That meant creating time for me to, like I said, reflect and to honestly reflect. I'm making that distinction because we can reflect on our past experiences and not be that honest with ourselves, and more so look at those experiences as memories, or we can point fingers or place blame elsewhere when we look back on how things worked out or panned out in different situations. But when we give ourselves honest reflection, it's taking a step back and looking at it from a outside perspective and understanding the role that we played and taking responsibility for the things that we have done and what may have led to that, either with our thoughts or our actions or even our attitude. That's what I spent the last few years of my life doing, reflecting back on my past experiences. And I did that by creating time to meditate or creating time to think, and also by journaling about my experiences and writing down any insights, feelings, or thoughts I had surrounding those experiences. That way I could better understand them. The biggest part in all of this was that I was very intentional about not clinging or holding on to any old beliefs I had. I also had to be mindful of whom and what I allowed to influence those beliefs, which meant distancing myself from things that may be overly religious or people that I felt would try to steer my beliefs in a certain direction. Also, it meant limiting my exposure to movies, politics, magazines, or even books that I felt might project their perceptions or assumptions onto me. This sounds a bit extreme, I know, but I didn't want anything to stop me from seeing what I needed to see or understanding what I felt I was seeking to understand. Instead of holding on to previous belief system or previous way of thinking, I allowed my own experiences to paint that picture or to establish those beliefs for me. Here's what I discovered. That greater source, the greater power, God, the universe, whatever you intend to call it, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what you call it. As long as you believe that there is something greater guiding your life, then you open up your heart and mind to that relationship and for that greater source or that greater power to show you the role it is supposed to play in your life. That will likely be different for everyone. Because each one of us is unique, our relationship with that greater source, with that greater power is also going to be unique. And what we call it and how we identify it and what we label it as will be different. I also discovered that I could connect with this greater source or this greater power by looking within and through concentrated thought, which some may call prayer. Now, this concentrated thought or this prayer or these intentions that we put out, everyone's going to have a different way of doing this. This can be through meditation. This can be through writing. This can be through prayer on your hands and knees. This can be through yoga. This can even be through listening and dancing to music. Whatever helps you look within and helps you set the intention to connect to that greater source, then that is what works. Your intentions are what matter, not the ritual. The goal is to do whatever it takes to free your mind of any negative, worrisome, fearful, or even anxious thoughts, because those are the things that block our communication and our connection to that higher power. And that's the reason why a positive and an optimistic attitude is so important, because it opens up those doorways and it puts us in a place to receive those powerful insights or those great ideas, or to attract the things or people that are meant to be in our lives. Here's another cool thing I discovered. It doesn't matter where you do this from. It doesn't have to be a church. It doesn't have to be a meditation center. It doesn't even have to be a religious or spiritual place. You can do this from your home. You can do this from your car. You can do this from work. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, wherever feels like the place that makes the most sense to connect to that greater source is what matters. It was through these realizations and through my own path of self-discovery and self-reflection that I realized each one of us has a purpose here. Things happen in our lives for a reason, and that reason is to help us discover what that purpose is. And it's through reflecting on our past experiences that we discover that purpose. And even though each one of our purposes is going to be unique to us and our experiences, ultimately, our purpose here is going to be for the betterment of humanity as a whole and to leave the earth a better place than it was before we arrived. I 100% believe that. And it was this understanding that helped me discover that my purpose here is to be a healer and to use my past experiences not only to heal myself, but to use my voice and my presence to help heal others and to teach them how to heal themselves. Had I never taken the time to look back on my life and to reflect back on my past experiences, I wouldn't have realized that everything that happened in my life, whether I stumbled, whether I felt like I made a mistake, whether I felt like I was not headed in the right direction, none of those things happened by accident. None of those things happened by coincidence. Had a lot of those experiences never happened in my life, I wouldn't be where I'm at today with the capabilities of using my experiences to help other people and to teach others from my experiences, just like I'm doing right now by speaking to you. It was this discovery that has shaped my entire life. Everything I do and everything that is part of my life today is to help me move closer and more into that purpose. And one of the biggest things for me is now, instead of thinking about how does this better me or how does this help me get further along in life or to become more successful, I ask myself before I do something, does this help me grow and grow more into my purpose? If the answer is no, then I don't do it. So this understanding has also shaped my morals, and it comes less from a place of right from wrong or from a fear of being condemned or punished in some way, but more so from a place of how can I shape my attitude, my actions, and my energy to better myself and in turn help humanity grow as a whole and to expand and to leave the world a better place. That's where free will comes into play, because even though things happen in our life for a reason, it is our responsibility to learn that lesson and to see it for what it is and what it was meant to teach us. Or we can choose to be stubborn and ignore those lessons and continue to make choices and decisions that are selfish and only serve to better us and in turn hurt other people. That's where I believe you see some of these negative things happening in the world. It's not God or the universe allowing them to happen, or even an evil source making them happen. It is people who have chosen to remain stubborn and continue to ignore the lessons that life is trying to teach them, and instead they choose to live a life that is selfish and self-centered. And in the process, they hurt themselves, they hurt the people around them, and they cause pain and trauma in the world. I know this may sound crazy, but it is those stubborn people and the ones who choose to live their life in a selfish way that often teaches very valuable lessons. And when people like that get in positions of power, they teach humanity as a whole valuable lessons. Even though things they do may be hurtful and may be harmful, they still serve a purpose and they still have a place. I believe that that is the point of this life, to be present in the moment, but to use our past experiences, the trials or the things that we had to overcome, and to see the lesson that we were supposed to learn from them. And in the process, we're supposed to use those lessons to help ourselves and to find our purpose and to do everything within our power to fulfill that purpose. I believe that this is where that higher power steps in, that it isn't there to judge us, to condemn us, to restrict our experiences, or even lay down guidelines for exactly how we're supposed to live our lives, but is there to support us and to show us unconditional love as we stumble, as we fall, as we make mistakes, and as we do our best to find our way. Which means this greater power also understands that at times we are going to get lost. And at times we are going to stray away from the path. And at those times is when that higher power is going to do things to redirect us or to help us find that path again. It does this by placing certain thoughts in our heads that encourage us to do something, by putting certain feelings in our heart that urge us to go a certain place or to contact a certain person, by implanting messages and dreams that resonate with us, by having certain events happen in our lives, or by placing people in the right place at the right time in order to guide us. That's the reason why it's so important for us to trust ourselves and to trust our instincts and what we feel we are being called to do. These things are no accident. They are messages from that greater source, and it is up to each one of us to recognize them and to act on them. It was this understanding that allowed me to find compassion and unconditional love for myself. And in turn, it gave me unconditional love and compassion for others, because I realized, just like me, everyone else is doing their best to figure things out and learning as they go. This was extremely freeing because it allowed me to let go of all the guilt, the shame, the blame, the judgment, and the fear of being condemned, and gave me an overall feeling of peace within myself and in my individual journey and purpose. It was this feeling of peace and unconditional love found within myself and that I now had for others is what I believe all the great prophets of all the major religions was talking about. Is that unconditional love, is that peace, is that compassion for everyone. And I believe if each one of us finds this and lives a life that is true to us and true to our purpose, then ultimately we are going to be doing what that greater source intended for us to do. So that's all I have for you today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that by hearing and listening to my story that you were able to gain a little more insight into your own life and into your own experiences to see what they were meant to teach you. If you don't find all the answers, that's okay. I don't have all the answers. This is when believing in yourself and having faith in your process comes into play. If you don't feel a connection to that higher power or to that greater source, then I hope that by hearing my story, you gained the courage to find that greater power. So ultimately, you can connect to your purpose here. Remember, this is my story based on my own experiences. In no way, shape, or form am I judging or attacking anyone else's belief system or their way of living. Your story and your journey will be your story and your journey. Through your own self-reflection, based on your own experiences, you will come to your own conclusions. If there's something I said that you don't agree with, or something I didn't talk about, feel free to replace or to fill in any blanks that make sense to you. That's the beauty of it. If you are one of those people who are currently in a religious setting and it makes you feel inner peace and it makes you feel connected to that higher power and to your purpose, and that comes with unconditional love and compassion, not only for yourself, but for everyone else in the world, despite what they believe in, then great. That is exactly where you are supposed to be. But if you are one of those people in the same setting and you feel restricted or you feel inferior or even superior, or that you are being manipulated, or that you should be willing to manipulate others, or that you can't accept all of your experiences because they don't fit into that current belief system, or even if you feel that you have the right to judge or condemn other people, then maybe it's time to take a closer look at that. And it's time to question that. And it's time to ask yourself, do these values or do these beliefs feel true to me? If not, then I hope by hearing my story, you gain the courage to step out on your own, to look at your own life and your own experiences to find out what that greater source or what that greater power is supposed to be in your life, and to use that connection to connect with your purpose so that you can start living a life that is more true to you. Once again, I want to thank those who listen and choose to continue to listen this far. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. I am really looking forward to speaking and sharing that message with you next time. But until then, know that I am sending positive and loving vibes your way.